Foreign interference in the 2016 election seems to be just about the only thing the Democrats and much of the media care about. Which is interesting considering that foreign interference in our democracy has been going on for decades, and the Democrat and Republican establishments in Washington are both up to their necks in it. It is anti-American, entirely legal, and it all stinks. Foreign government lobbying is this week's Swamp Watch. A few weeks ago, a lawyer named Alex van der Zwaan pled guilty to lying to Robert Mueller's Russia probe. Van der Zwaan's employer was a big establishment law firm in Washington, D.C., Skadden Arps, which worked on behalf of the former communist tyrant of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, a puppet of Vladimir Putin. Skadden Arps is a perfect example of how the ruling elites in Washington have put themselves out for hire to any foreign government who will pay them big bucks, regardless of how corrupt they are, how oppressive they are, or whether their aim is to hurt America. Look who's one of the prominent lawyers at swampy Skadden Arps: President Obama's former White House chief counsel, Greg Craig. But Skadden Arps are just amateurs compared to the Podesta Group. Remember them? It was co-founded by Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, and his brother, Tony. It literally shut down after the Mueller investigation started digging into its sleazy ties to Russia. Memo to the media: these Clinton cronies were lobbying for Russian interests years before Donald Trump's campaign. Like Skadden Arps, the Podestas also helped Putin's puppet in Ukraine. And of course, as we now know, they lobbied for Uranium One, the Russian tied company who got Hillary Clinton's approval to buy 20% of our uranium supply. But it's not just Russia. Over 30 swampy years, the Podesta Group, the epicenter of the Democratic Party elite, represented a list of shady clients, including the notoriously corrupt former Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan and even Saudi Arabia, with all its grotesque human rights abuses. The Saudis paid the Podesta Group more than $1 million a year for lobbying and PR. Of course, the Podesta Group didn't just serve foreign governments by holding swanky dinner parties for the DC elite, though there were plenty of those. Swampy contracts require cold, hard cash, too. Just in the 2016 election cycle, members of the Podesta Group donated over $1.1 million to political campaigns, including over $170,000 to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and more than $46,000 to their old chum Hillary Clinton. Unbelievably, all this foreign lobbying is perfectly legal as long as it's declared. The 1938 Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, requires lobbyists representing foreign clients to disclose their activity to the federal government. But FARA is a joke, just like the Federal Election Commission, which is supposed to enforce rules on political donations. It's another example of Washington's toothless transparency. The whole point of transparency is that giving the public information keeps people honest. Well, good luck finding information on foreign government lobbying. I went to FARA's website myself. It's almost impossible to make sense of. But I did my best, and we're going to bring the transparency tonight. The Glover Park Group, founded by President Bill Clinton's press secretary, Joe Lockhart, pocketed a $100,000 a month lobbying contract from Saudi Arabia in 2016, thereby joining the club of Clinton cronies pushing the agenda of the world's largest exporters of Islamist extremism, who only recently allowed women to drive. Another elite DC firm, Squire Patton Boggs, earned $40,000 a month from the government of Sudan to help repeal U.S. sanctions that have been in place for 2 decades. Sudan is designated as a state sponsor of terrorism. Its president, Omar al-Bashir, has been in power since 1989 and is wanted by the International Criminal Court on 3 counts of genocide, 2 counts of war crimes, and 5 counts of crimes against humanity, including rape, torture, and murder. What a charming client to have. In 2015, that same firm, Squire Patton Boggs, also earned more than $100,000 a quarter lobbying for the Chinese government. China is our enemy. What in the world is this establishment law firm doing, taking money from them? It's like lobbying for the Soviet Union in the 1980s. Of course, one of the strategies in China's economic warfare against America involves hiring U.S. lobbyists to help win approval to buy our companies. These acquisitions are regulated by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS. It was CFIUS that recently blocked the foreign takeover of one of our leading chip makers, Qualcomm, because it might give China an edge in vital future technology. And that was a great sign, by the way, that under Donald Trump, we are getting tougher on China. But unbelievably, many CFIUS officials leave their government positions to join the very same lobbying firms that China hires to help them get CFIUS approval. For example, Anne Saladin spent 20 years in the Treasury Department and reviewed some 500 deals serving on CFIUS before joining the law firm Struck & Lavan, where she advised a Chinese private equity firm on its purchase of US semiconductor assets. But if there's one single person who invented the foreign lobbying swamp, it's this man. Yes, you know him. For a short time, he was Donald Trump's campaign chairman. He only lasted a few months before he was fired when details of his shady past started to overshadow the Trump campaign. Paul Manafort was active in Republican student politics in the 1970s and managed to get close to Ronald Reagan's political team. After the Reagan administration took office, Manafort set up a lobbying firm to capitalize on his connections. Before then, lobbying was not the massive industry it is today. It was mainly done by industry associations. But Manafort's real innovation was foreign lobbying. The writer Franklin Furr has reported how one of Manafort's client proposals advertised personal relationships with officials and promised to upgrade back channels related to economics and foreign policy. And guess what? The snooty Republican elites who today happily condemn Manafort, they were in on it too. For example, The Atlantic reported that James Baker III, pillar of the GOP establishment and George Bush 41 Secretary of State, literally sent Manafort foreign government clients. Manafort's firm lobbied for dictators and crooks all over the world, from the brutal and corrupt Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines to the vile and thuggish Jonas Savimbi of Angola, whose army committed atrocities against children and conscripted women into sexual slavery. This is Paul Manafort leaving a courthouse in Virginia a couple of weeks ago after his trial date for tax evasion was set.
Traitor! Traitor! You're selling America out to the Russians. Traitor! Traitor!
That man is right. Manafort really is a traitor. But let's not pretend he's the only one. Just look at John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. His firm was just as bad. At least Donald Trump fired Manafort. The ruling elite in Washington, the media and the establishment figures on both sides of the aisle, they want to put it all on Manafort and pretend he's the rotten apple in the barrel. Well, we are not going to let them get away with that, because the truth is they are nearly all rotten. Every single one of those big Washington firms, the ones that members of Congress and administration officials slink off to once they're out of office. If you're being paid by foreign governments, you are betraying America, and we will expose you. Every single senator, every member of the House, every one of your staff members, you're supposed to represent your constituents in this country, not some other country's interests. If you take a meeting with a lobbyist for a foreign government, you are betraying America, and we will expose you. Foreign governments have embassies. They have ambassadors. Why the hell do they need a bunch of greedy, corrupt Washington elites to push their interests in exchange for fat fees? It's time to close down the foreign government lobbying swamp. If you agree with me, let me know on Twitter @SteveHiltonX and @NextRevFNC.